Fewer young people than ever are likely to buy a house in their lifetime, even as home prices continue to rise each year. But if hardly anyone can afford a house, why do prices keep going up? The idea of saving a 20% down payment seems almost impossible, especially when rents can skyrocket without warning. A family home should be a cornerstone of your financial stability. It provides a place to live while allowing you to build equity in a property you can eventually call your own. In many cities, a monthly mortgage payment on a 30-year loan costs less than renting. So if you're able to buy a home, you'll benefit financially both now and in the future. You probably know this already, but if you're among the 75% of my audience who don't own a home, it's likely because you can't afford one. A Redfin report found that in 2022, only 21% of listed homes were classified as affordable, a sharp decline from 60% in 2021. This means that within just 1 year, 2/3 of affordable homes became too expensive for the average American. The researchers concluded that housing affordability is currently at its lowest point in history. But where does this lead? If people can't afford homes, shouldn't prices stop rising? Unfortunately, that's not the case. While I don't want to join the trend of predicting a housing crash within days, there are 3 reasons things might get worse before they improve. First, houses don't need to be affordable for you to buy one. It might seem counterintuitive, but there's an entire industry designed to make this possible. You're not saving to buy a house outright, you're saving for the down payment. Housing costs have become disconnected from wages. While wages haven't kept pace with rising home prices, a down payment increases at only a fraction of the overall rate. This means people can still enter the market, albeit with difficulty. Zillow data shows that the average home in 2020 sold for $230,000. By early 2023, that average price jumped to $330,000, a $100,000 increase in under 3 years. Meanwhile, Forbes reports that the average annual salary in America is $59,000 before taxes. After federal taxes and FICA, the take-home pay is around $49,000. If someone saved an extreme 70% of their take-home income for a home, they'd still be just as far from their goal after 3 years because home prices rose at the same rate as their savings. In essence, homes are earning as much as people are. Most buyers, however, focus only on saving for a down payment. This means that saving 70% effectively turns into 14%, or even 7% if both partners in a dual-income household earn the average salary. That's still a significant commitment, especially considering that 57% of Americans can't handle an unexpected $1,000 expense without borrowing money. Saving 14% of your income should, in theory, be more manageable than 70%. But this only allows you to keep pace with rising prices. It doesn't get you any closer to actually purchasing a home. Banks and lenders with significant investments in real estate understand that many families struggle to cover essential expenses like food and rent, which are rising faster than wages. To address this, they've adjusted their expectations. According to a National Association of Realtors report, the average down payment for first-time homebuyers is just 7%. For repeat buyers who've had the opportunity to build equity from a previous home, the average down payment is only 17%. When down payments are this low, home prices can rise significantly relative to incomes before purchasing becomes impossible. For example, if you only need a 7% down payment, saving just 10% of your income over 3 years could be enough to afford an average-priced home. This requires more discipline than most people manage, but it's not entirely out of reach with some sacrifices. For those who still find that difficult, Zillow recently introduced a pilot program offering loans with just a 1% down payment. This initiative aims to help those who haven't been able to save for a down payment take on the biggest financial commitment of their lives. Here's how the program works. The buyer contributes a 1% down payment, and Zillow adds a 2% grant at closing. This grant doesn't need to be repaid. While home prices may be rising faster than wages, these lower down payment options are making it easier to enter the housing market. However, securing the down payment is only the first step. You still need to keep up with mortgage payments, and if a 20% down payment is out of reach, maintaining monthly repayments may also be a challenge. To understand whether this financial cycle can continue indefinitely, it's essential to grasp the fundamentals of how money works. This week's financial lesson is brought to you by Trade Coffee. It probably won't surprise you to hear that my team and I rely on a lot of coffee to keep producing content about finance, history, and daily compounding. I've been drinking the same coffee for a long time, not because I love it, but just to give me a boost. However, since I started using Trade Coffee, my old coffee now tastes bland and unappealing. Trade Coffee has brought back my enthusiasm for coffee by introducing me to a selection of over 450 coffees from more than 55 roasters. They offer everything from dark roasts and espresso blends to rare varieties. Their smart matching system helps you find the ideal coffee based on your preferences. For instance, I like fruity flavors with hints of chocolate, and Trade recommended Sightglass Organic Toka Tea. It was incredible. If you want to try it out, you can get a free bag of coffee with any subscription by visiting *drinktrade.com/howmoneyworks***. With free shipping, customizable plans, and the option to cancel anytime, Trade makes discovering great coffee easy. The second reason home prices continue to rise even when most people can't afford them is that homeowners are not selling. People who have fixed 30-year mortgage rates below 3% are reluctant to sell their homes. Consequently, fewer properties are being listed, even though there are still many people looking to buy. In fact, home sales in the US are at their lowest point in a decade despite an increasing population. Data from the National Association of Realtors shows that 6 million homes were sold in 2021. Today, that number has dropped to an annualized rate of just 4 million homes. Homeowners with mortgages don't want to sell because renting is even less affordable. Plus, if they buy a new home, they'll end up with a mortgage at a much higher interest rate than the one they currently have. Many people moved during the COVID pandemic, and relocating again so soon would disrupt their social and family lives. Additionally, taking on a new mortgage at current high interest rates adds significant financial strain. On average, homeowners stay in their homes for 13.2 years. After the surge of home purchases over the last 3 years, many Americans are now settling into their homes, and it will likely be a long time before they consider selling. New buyers are also delaying their purchases in hopes that interest rates will drop. Interestingly, household size has recently increased for the first time in 160 years, reversing a long trend of smaller families and young adults moving out on their own. According to a Pew Research report, this shift is due to more young adults choosing, or being forced, to stay with their parents longer to avoid the high cost of living independently. While the market still sees some activity, typical buyers and sellers are holding off until conditions become more favorable. This leaves 3 key groups who are still participating in the market, which explains why the situation can continue longer than expected. The first group consists of all cash buyers who have funds from selling their previous homes. For example, if you're a baby boomer who bought a house in the 1970s at a much lower price, this is an ideal time to downsize. Higher prices mean the gap between the value of a larger home and a smaller property is wider, allowing you to cash out and have more money to live on. The second group includes people relocating to different states. As housing prices in major cities become unaffordable, many are leaving expensive urban areas. Even if their job allows them to work remotely, these individuals often prefer to stay in their home city, but the high costs are forcing them to consider other options. People tend to stay close to their roots. On average, they live just 18 miles from their hometown. Dubai, maybe? He's got that flashy YouTuber vibe. He'd probably enjoy living on one of those palm-shaped islands, shopping for designer brands in luxury malls, and hitting the indoor ski slopes. That seems like his style. As for me, I've stuck with my tiny one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco because moving is a hassle. But if you're feeling the financial strain of living in a high-cost city, relocating to a more affordable place can significantly improve your quality of life. Leaving cities like San Francisco, Seattle, or New York for a cheaper area means you'll get much more house for the same amount of money. However, the higher salaries earned in these expensive cities tend to drive up prices wherever you move. Ironically, in trying to escape rising housing costs, you may inadvertently contribute to them. This increased competition for rentals is partly because fewer people are transitioning from renting to homeownership. As the housing market slows, renters stay in place longer, which limits supply and drives up demand for rental properties. The third group keeping the housing market active is investors. Investors are primarily focused on the return on their investments. Even though property prices are high and financing now comes with higher interest rates, investors offset these costs by charging higher rents, whether to long-term tenants or short-term guests through platforms like Airbnb. Despite this, housing prices remain excessively high. Investors have driven the largest increase in home purchases. Redfin reported that investment purchases grew by 145% year-over-year in 2022. Institutional investors, particularly those acquiring properties for real estate investment trusts, REITs, were the fastest growing segment. REITs function like index funds for real estate. They pool money from numerous investors to buy a diverse portfolio of properties. These trusts can be purchased either privately through firms like Blackstone for high net worth individuals or publicly as exchange-listed securities accessible to everyday investors. Traditionally, REITs focused on commercial properties such as shopping malls, hotels, warehouses, office buildings, and farmland because their high costs made them suitable for shared investments. However, residential REITs have surged in popularity. Many people who can't afford to buy homes are turning to residential REITs to gain exposure to the housing market. By investing in these trusts, they hope their savings will keep pace with rising home prices, effectively using them as a substitute for a down payment fund. The growing popularity of REITs is a direct result of the housing affordability crisis, but in turn, they have made homes even less affordable. This cycle is unsustainable, and the situation is reaching a breaking point. As frustrating as it is to admit, those sensational finfluencer thumbnails might actually have a point. The market is starting to shift. This explains why housing prices are resistant to dropping and why they could still rise, even if it seems illogical. A recent Redfin report shows that investor purchases have slowed down significantly. Surveys of real estate agents in cities like Las Vegas, Austin, Miami, and Houston indicate that institutional buying has stopped altogether. Earlier this year, the private equity firm Blackstone, not to be confused with BlackRock, the investment index giant, had to restrict investor withdrawals from its $71 billion real estate fund, raising fears that the market was overvalued. If too many investors withdraw their money at once, Blackstone would be forced to sell off properties in its portfolio. BlackRock faced similar allegations of inflating property values in its portfolio. However, proving overvaluation is difficult until a property actually sells. The moment one property is sold, comparable properties must be reassessed at a similar market value. If this triggers a significant drop in the trust's value, more investors might try to withdraw their funds, forcing additional sales and further driving prices down. But don't get too optimistic. If you hold shares in a REIT, the simplest way to cash out is to sell your shares to another investor, which doesn't require liquidating the properties themselves. Additionally, there's a fourth factor contributing to the market's resilience. Wealthy families are holding onto more properties than ever. Historically, family wealth would diminish within 2 generations. However, with investing becoming both easier and more profitable, we may be entering a new era of wealth preservation where family fortunes last for centuries. Some American billionaires have already achieved this. Thanks for watching, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. See you next time.